Yeah, so I don't buy the official narrative about how he killed himself. But again, Epstein had his hand in too many pies for it to be like fleshed out to the full extent, you know? So it had to be kind of a controlled demolition.
Whitney Webb recently shredded the government's official Epstein death narrative in a clip here on the Peter McCormick Show, where she delves into the circumstances related to his death, the reasons that the government is trying to cover it up, and why the official narrative that Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel are still running with here does not withstand even a small amount of scrutiny. She's probably the foremost expert on Epstein in the world. Let's get her take on this. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel.
But you believe at this point he's being discarded?
So I can't say with any certainty I know why it was, but here's the thing. I don't think the U.S. government, specifically a district as known to be as corrupt as the Southern District of New York, SDNY, would be like outraged on behalf of the victims that Epstein had been let off so leniently 12 years before, and it was all because of Julie Brown at the Miami Herald. They decided to go after him. I mean, that just seems like a cover story to me. Not to imply that Julie Brown was involved in that, but I think her reporting gave them an opening to go after this guy, at least some faction, for something. Yeah, I think Epstein probably pissed off someone, because I think Epstein was likely involved with the rise of the current Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, who had a very uncharacteristic rise to power, I believe in 2017 or so. And Epstein was very involved in Saudi Arabia, going back to his relationship with Khashoggi. There's this issue, for example, in talking about his intelligence links. He had this Austrian passport that showed Epstein's face, but a fake name. And all of this stuff, and it was frequently travel. He was using it to frequently travel back to and from Saudi Arabia and all these other places. And I think his address on it was listed as being Saudi or something like that. And obviously, Khashoggi was a very important player in Saudi world, and Epstein and him had a pretty important relationship.
Yeah, one account has Epstein being the overseer of Khashoggi's finances, that Khashoggi was actually his client. And for anyone that doesn't know that's watching this, Adnan Khashoggi was heavily involved in arms trafficking operations in the 1980s. He was sort of a Saudi playboy, kind of the prototypical, stereotypical rich Saudi at the time, and was involved in the Iran-Contra operation. And what a lot of people might not know about that, if you weren't around at that time, was the U.S. was funneling arms to the Contras in Nicaragua, but they did it through Israel. The arms actually went to Israel first, and then from there they were trafficked elsewhere. This was to skirt the law, the U.S. law at the time that prohibited arming those Contras. So yeah, she's right. Epstein had a deep connection to arms traffickers like Khashoggi.
And as it relates to John Brennan had been CIA station chief in the capital of Saudi Arabia for a long time, and the crown prince that was deposed by Mohammed bin Salman, we'll call him MBS for now, that MBS took out of power, had been the guy that Brennan had basically groomed to be the new crown prince. That was like the CIA's golden boy, you could say.
So Epstein interfered.
Well, I think Epstein was part of the group that put MBS into power. Pictures of them figured prominently in his townhouse. I think Epstein was an architect of MBS's Vision 2030, which was his policies for a post-oil Saudi Arabia. And Epstein appears to have been managing Saudi wealth funds, at least one sovereign wealth fund of theirs. And I say that about Vision 2030 because one of the first things MBS did as part of that was to promote Sophia the robot. He gave her citizenship to be like the first robot to be granted citizenship. But the people that made that robot, Ben Goertzel and Hanson Robotics, heavily funded by Epstein. So I think it's very likely he was the one that connected him, and he was very interested in AI and robotics, transhumanism.
Yeah, he actually held conferences at his properties, attended by people of prominence like Stephen Hawking, even, to promote the arts and sciences. He was really interested in bizarre aspects of science and kind of, disseminating himself and his genes throughout the world, also with AI, and things that were connected to Epstein and the circles he ran in, and these scientific summits. He was so involved in scientific research that he, was very heavily involved with Harvard too, made many visits to Harvard after he was convicted of child molestation in Florida, and they even built his own office for him in Harvard because of his dedication to science in Harvard or something like that.
And a lot of the stuff that's sort of within Vision 2030.
But ultimately his what he was doing was working against US interests at that point.
Well, I mean, again, this is a transnational thing, and so you have transnational factions too. But basically, I think it's pretty clear that the Obama faction is different than the Trump faction, right? And so you're having someone like John Brennan getting pissed off at whoever took out his favored leader of Saudi Arabia and put in MBS. Because MBS was too young to be crown prince. It's about seniority in Saudi Arabia. It doesn't go father-son like that because, I mean, when you're king of Saudi Arabia, you have like an insane number of kids, right? And so it tends to be passed through uncles and, it's seniority. And he came to power in his early 30s. And then he put all these other Saudi royals and prominent aristocrats, in the Ritz-Carlton. I don't know if you remember this. They were like hung upside down.
It's the meeting.
The shakedown.
Yeah.
All of that stuff happened. So there was obviously a big shakeup of the power structure of Saudi Arabia, which has always been very close to U.S. interests.
Sure has. The U.S. has actually supported the Saudis in their civil war versus Yemen, where the Saudis have essentially backed off the ground war part of that operation against the Houthis and the Yemeni civil war going back over a decade, but the U.S. has participated in a starvation blockade there that has killed 500,000 or so people so far. When it's all said and done, it might be something like 1 million on behalf of the Saudis. Why? The Saudis didn't want the U.S. to overthrow Saddam Hussein in Iraq. They correctly believed that would lead to a power vacuum with more Iranian influence coming in and the Shiites essentially taking over. They predicted that one correctly. And because of that, Obama decided to placate the Saudis by backing them against the Yemenis. So you can see how this kind of relationship is poisonous from the America First perspective. They're going to continue this war. Trump used one of his sole vetoes to keep that going on behalf of the Saudis. Just one example.
When he comes to power. And MBS not only had close ties to Epstein, he also had really close ties to Jared Kushner. Apparently, Kushner and Adam Newman of WeWork, the Israeli guy, were texting each other all the time, and they were going to bring peace to the Middle East and help and develop what would, part of what would become the Abraham Accords together.
Yeah, the Abraham Accords, which Trump signed to signal how pro-Israel he was, even though his DHS itself, even the DHS warned Trump that this would inflame tensions in the region. And yeah, of course, Epstein knew Jared Kushner. Why wouldn't he? As Kushner talks about how, great the prospective real estate would be in Gaza to create this new Riviera on the Mediterranean after the genocide that Netanyahu enacts is all said and done, which, by the way, his father-in-law supports, Donald Trump, and is willing to give Netanyahu anything he wants, including participation in wars of choice of Netanyahu's like Iran's recently.
Okay.
So obviously MBS is tight with the Trump crowd. And so even if Epstein and Trump didn't like each other personally at this point, that doesn't mean that the power structure that has enabled them both to do their thing, I mean, they still operate in that, arguably. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. So I think, Epstein pissed off interests related to John Brennan. And John Brennan was also an architect of Russiagate, right? Which was also aimed at Trump. And then the whole Jamal Khashoggi thing happens in MBS's charm offensive, where he's like, I'm a reformer. I'm here in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to change everything up and open movie theaters and let women have some rights, and all of that.
Drive a car.
Yeah. He paid a ton of money for that. And then the Jamal Khashoggi thing just evaporated it like that,
For those that aren't aware, Jamal Khashoggi was the nephew of Adnan Khashoggi, who we mentioned before. He was a dissident journalist, a Saudi dissident journalist, who was murdered by the ruling Saudi regime and Mohammed bin Salman, who first denied his murder, but then when it became, impossible to deny based on surveillance and information that leaked out about it, they admitted to his killing. A dissident that, was more pro-Western, pro-liberty, was killed by the Saudi regime, which are the allies of the United States, by the way.
And so I think there was stuff that went on to kind of get at Trump and MBS, and I think also, of course, Epstein, not long after all of that. But again, Epstein, had his hand in too many pies for it to be like fleshed out to the full extent, so it had to be kind of a controlled demolition. And what's interesting, so I brought up William Barr a few times. He's basically the Republican CIA mop-up man. But one of the main lawyers for Epstein victim, Stanley Pottinger, is basically that for the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And his law partner, Brad Edwards, is the one that tipped the FBI off about the guy with the black book and got him sent to prison. I mean, there's kind of some weird stuff there.
Yeah, Brad Edwards still represents many of the Epstein victims, I'm pretty sure, actually.
So anyway, if you want to do a controlled demolition, so to speak, of Epstein, you need to have at least some control of both sides. And it's interesting that one of the main prosecutors for, I think, Maxwell's case and then later the Diddy case, is James Comey's daughter, Maureen Comey. I mean, you have like a lot of powerful connections here, and I think a part of it is aimed at controlling both sides because you can't have too much come out,
Yeah, certainly. Everything tells us this was a bipartisan operation, that both Democrats and Republicans were involved. A lot of, the Democrats right now are clamoring for the release of the Epstein files, but when Biden was in power, a lot of the Republicans were, and many of the Democrats were silent. One exception is Ron Wyden. He did talk about disclosing information related to this, including wire transfers that the Treasury Department is known to have between Epstein and, as he said, people of prominence that they won't divulge. This has kind of been memory hold from the media too. But now you have a lot of Trump fans saying, hey, well, if Trump was implicated in these crimes, or people really close to Trump, the Democrats would have, unveiled this information and released it back during Biden's presidency when he controlled the DOJ. And it's like, well, no, not if they were implicated too. In that case, they wouldn't release it whatsoever. And I think that's the most plausible explanation for this cover-up being bipartisan, along the same lines that Whitney's talking about here.
Yeah. And so at that point, they've got compromise on Epstein himself anyway.
Well, sure.
Yeah. And so he's done. He's cooked, facing prosecution. Do you think he killed himself?
Here's the $1 million question. Let's see what she says.
Yeah. So I don't buy the official narrative about how he killed himself. But I also don't want to say I know what happened authoritatively because I don't think anyone does.
No.
Right? Because even now with attempts to release footage and whatever, it's inconclusive and doesn't show anything.
And there's like a bit of footage missing and it flickers, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're not very good.
No, but I think they were just hoping that, it would be enough to keep people quiet and memory hole it and make people
It's done the
move
opposite.
on. Huh?
It's done the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of poor calculations, I think, were made,
Do you think this is just going to fade away now?
I mean, I hope not, obviously, because I think it's a huge miscarriage of justice. Because, I mean, even beyond the sex trafficking stuff, this is a network involved in extreme financial criminality.
Yes, certainly so. I hope it doesn't go away. I hope she's right about that. Epstein didn't kill himself. The famous thing that has become a famous statement and a meme to some people about how prevalent it is, because it's very clear that more Americans distrust the government narrative on Epstein's death than trust it, including, many of Trump's supporters that are listening to that same line, the same line that Biden, the administration, repeated, uttered now by Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. They're not trusting this. And for good reason. Even Epstein's lawyers don't believe he killed himself. In fact, they hired forensic pathologist Michael Biden, probably the most famous forensic pathologist in the world, to take a look at his body, conduct an autopsy on it, and they found that 3 bones were broken in his neck, 2 of which don't typically break during a hanging, which they say he hung himself, right? And, you know, there were a few different orange-colored supposed nooses strewn about his room, his cell, and it's not exactly clear which one he used. There's no camera footage of within the cell because they said at first the cameras were malfunctioning. Then it turns out it looks like the guards were negligent too, and either were asleep or, you know, may have deliberately shut off the cameras. And there's really been no good explanation for this, but what we do know is the guy running custody over Epstein at that time, William Barr, Donald Barr's son, jumped to conclusions saying there's no foul play here right away and buried any attempt to actually investigate it as if it was a homicide, instead doubling down and saying this was an absolute suicide no matter what, even though, you know, there's other odd circumstances involved too, including that they moved a cellmate of Epstein out of his cell like the day before or something like that. This big burly ex-cop that was in for violent crimes as well. They moved that guy out. So if I can't believe that he would have killed himself unless there was some kind of, you know, operation, some conspiracy from within the prison helping him to do that. And I don't know if I buy that at all. Epstein became disposable to the intelligence community, pissing off the wrong person, perhaps, as Whitney says, and they did away with him. And nothing that they have showed in that footage has given us clarity on this beyond the shadow of the doubt, despite the fact that Bondi said, oh, hey, no, it's incontroversial now. He absolutely killed himself. No, the footage you gave us does not exactly indicate that. And 3 minutes of it were missing, by the way. And you said that cameras erased a minute of footage every single night going back to 1999, Bondi said. But then it turned out that was contradicted by the government itself when they released one of the lost minutes that they found. Not the other 2, but one of the 3 lost minutes. So that's where we're at. I don't think we're going to get answers. I do think both parties and people of prominence in both tribes of the Uniparty in the United States were involved, and that's the most plausible explanation. But what do you think? Let me know down below. Did Epstein kill himself? What are some other odd factors about Epstein's life that are still unexplainable? And is Whitney Webb correct? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Peter McCormick. His show's awesome. I really appreciated this interview with Whitney. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support my channel, and I'll tip my hat in appreciation to you for doing that. But that's not it. I'll also give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube if you help me out that way. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.